some of the newer like JDMs are very popular with Gen Zs and stuff like that. So like you were talking about before, you're always going to have the forever classics, but now that view of vehicles is really starting to change now. Are you seeing that? You're most of these, all these auctions. So how are you seeing it from your seat?
100%, guys. We continue to see demand shift and evolve. And going back to that phrase that you mentioned, those forever classics, that's what I tell people too, is that, your Tri-5 Chevys, your 69 Camaros, your muscle car, stuff like that.
Going to be forever.
That will remain, that will have that desire transcends firsthand connection. Because, that's what we see a lot of collecting is driven by, is firsthand experience. But what we find is that for people who don't have that firsthand experience with those cars of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even 80s in some case, those cars do transcend almost place and time, and they remain forever collectible. But what we're also seeing grow in increasingly larger numbers are the cars that people do have firsthand accounts or experiences with, and they're chasing them back from their youth. So these are the cars of the 80s, the 90s, and even 2000s. So we're seeing a big uptick in Fox bodies. Guys, they're going through the roof now in terms of people wanting collector grade examples of Fox bodied Mustangs.
They were big when I was in high school.
Honda S2000s. If you have a clean, if you have a clean example of an S2000 unmodified, hold on to that, because again, it's the nature of collecting is remaining the same. It's car enthusiasts that typically are wanting to chase after a car or a truck or a motorcycle that they had or they lusted after when they were younger. And as they get to a point in life where they start to have the funds, the discretionary funds, to go after it, they want the cars that they can really relate to. Yeah. And that's where I think it's exciting to see kind of this new era of collector cars come into the space.
I love it, actually. I love the fresh blood. I love the different perspective now. Instead of, everybody's chasing after the same Chevelle, everybody's chasing after the same Corvette. Now the S2000, I remember those, the Fox body Mustangs, those were huge when I was in high school. So that I love seeing that interject.
My daughter's boyfriend of 3 years is 18, it'll be 19 this year. And Matt, he said that his top three would be a 2009 C6 Corvette ZL1. ZR1, right? His second one would be an 84 C10, and his third one would be a 2014 Nissan GTR R35. And he's just all across the board. Yeah. I love that he's so diversified on it. Tell me what you think. If the big three didn't start going back in time, thinking about classic styling on these new 1,000 horsepower cars, would we be talking 200 plus million in sales? I wonder what the market would be like if the big three hadn't reemerged in the 2000s with all the new ideas and this new horsepower.
Yeah, I think certainly there's been a lot of excitement driven by Dodge. Dodge has always kind of kept a foot on the gas in the last 15 years. Yeah. They've had an incredible run with the previous gen Charger and Challenger in terms of driving excitement. Guys, you talk about younger generations. I'm amazed at how many people know a Hellcat, or they know, people who couldn't tell you the difference between a Mustang and Camaro, but they know Hellcat means something cool. Yeah. And they know it's something interesting. Yeah. And it's interesting, guys, because I've been driving a Durango Hellcat as one of our promotional cars around the country. And wherever I go, whenever people see that growling cat, again, they may not know all the details of the package, but they can recognize that mark and they know it's something special. And now this is on a Durango. So imagine the last 10 years or however many years we've had of Charger Challenger Hellcats to build on that. And Dodge has done a phenomenal job of marketing, having the product placement in some of the major film franchises like Fast and Furious and whatnot. But they have really supported the car enthusiasts. Now, also by that same token, Ford has also done a lot. That new S650 Mustang platform with the Dark Horse being an entirely new performance variant has also injected a lot of excitement and a lot of renewed interest. It's not a name from the past. This is something brand new that now younger generations can connect and identify. Man, a Dark Horse. That's cool. That's fast.
Heard of
that's
those.
loud.
I haven't heard of those. I'm a Mopar guy. Kenny's a Chevy guy.
I did though just last
you could
night.
Say I'm the Ford guy in the house.
Yeah, I think Bryce, you talked about those Mustangs not too long ago, right?
The Dark
same
Horse
ones?
is great. The Mustang GT3s and GTDs are really just mind-blowing, almost
cool.
supercar level.
Well, last night I saw a new Mustang, and it had a Mach 1 logo below the fender, and I'm like, they're bringing back a Mach 1 package. I mean, this is really new is old and old is new.
Yeah.
I really was blown away by that.
I just hope they're not doing it in name only. Because, you talk about how Dodge has always been very exciting, but they had to roll back all their EVs that they were going to release in 25, and they're like, because it makes such negative publicity, and Stellantis really dropped the ball, in my opinion, on that. But
yeah, and it's interesting to kind of see with each passing month how Dodge is working to connect with their enthusiast base. And I think they do have a clear path forward now, just in terms of how they want to offer this new Charger. I personally like the looks. I think they are retro inspired. I think the hatchback is a welcome body style that we haven't seen a lot of, that I think will be popular with enthusiasts. Let me circle back also to something that Bryce mentioned, going back to Ford. GTD, I mean, that's a mind-blowing concept where now we have a Mustang performance variant spectrum that is just insane, where you have entry-level V6s all the way up to this top-tier GTD, vehicle that's setting records at tracks around the country. So I will say, in terms of all this performance that's coming out of Detroit and what you can find in showrooms, it certainly does contribute to the collector space, right? Because in addition to seeing all of the traditional classic cars or collector cars, cars that have been in garages or storage facilities or in barns, whatever. We also continue to see, guys, vehicles from the showroom make their way to us because it also speaks to desirability. I mean, I think back over the last couple of years, some of the key players, Corvette C8, when you couldn't touch one of those, remember how long people were waiting to get their hands on it because of how radical of a model. Where you could find them is you could find them on the Mecum red carpet, because basically people were understanding that, hey, it doesn't just have to be a classic car that people are seeking after when they want some excitement in their driving preference. Bronco. Think about when the Bronco came back a couple years ago, guys. Same thing. You couldn't touch those. You couldn't find them anywhere. But where they were showing up was at a Mecum auction. Because again, so a collector car is a very wide definition. It's not just something with fins and chrome. And it certainly does include that, but it also includes the very latest showroom offerings.
Yeah, and I agree with that. We use the term American car classics, and the classic, you automatically think old. But I almost disagree with that now. I mean, I think modern, like, for example, the Demon 170s, so that's what they are, right? You guys had four in a row go across the blocks for over $100,000 each. Yeah. Don't tell me that's not a classic. Right. They're a year old, but that's going to be a classic. Like you said, Hellcat, they're going to know that for generations.
But we saw a 22 C8 first year come through and brought $130,000. And I flipped my phone up and I looked on Marketplace real quick just to see if some were for sale. And there were some in the 80s and 90s. And so I wonder, is it the vibe of the auction that gets people to buy that car? But here again, you get to see what you've got, and that it's at the auction being represented properly. I think that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, it certainly does. And I would also agree, too, that the term classic, as you mentioned, I would challenge people to rethink what that defines. Yeah. And, again, most people hear classic, and again, they think American Graffiti, chrome, the pastel colors. And it certainly does, guys. A 57 Bel Air, classic all day long. Yeah. 64 Mustang, classic all day long. Yeah. But it's also one of those of looking out. Hellcat, it's going to be a classic, so you could kind of say future classic. And I understand people see those and they think of them as new cars, and not just to dial in on Hellcat, but there's a whole spectrum. Look at modern exotics. That's something else that we continue to see a rise in at auction. Just the latest from Ferrari, Lamborghini, other big McLaren. Just stuff like that. So, I think collector cars, it's driven primarily by enthusiasm. It doesn't matter if a vehicle was in a showroom decades ago or you can find it now. If it's got people excited, you're going to see it at auction. Yeah.
Chris and I, here again, he's a numbers guy. Yeah, he's a numbers guy. And we started talking about percentages of how many cars were there. Chris came up with a number he thought maybe 40% 100% of the cars there were Corvettes and Mustangs. Now, I'll say that there were a lot more older Corvettes than there were older Mustangs, and there were a lot more newer Mustangs than there were newer Corvettes. But those two cars, and it really seemed, and there's a lot of Dodges, but it really seemed like those two
dominated the field.
Really just dominated the field. Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah, you know, guys, Corvette has been, you know, one of the highest in terms of volume vehicles on site at every collector car auction that we hold.
Okay.
You know, that remains a favorite for many enthusiasts. I mean, with such an incredible legacy, especially with all that the 8th generation has done. Now we're several years into the 8th generation. You know, I keep thinking that's the new kid on the block. I think we're 3 or 4 model years.
4 years in almost, yeah.
Generation. Are we 4 years? Okay.
Yeah, 20.
Yeah, 4 years. But I mean, it's just incredible. But I mean, that's, you know, America's sports car. People, you know, even people who don't know anything about collector cars are going to want to seek out a Corvette. You know, it's just something about that ever since 1953, that first model year. You know, it's been a car that's all about excitement, and coming from Chevrolet, you know, apple pie, baseball, Corvettes, let's go. But we see a lot of Mustangs out. You know, obviously that's a close second in terms of volume. Just another iconic model from the big three coming from Detroit. And I will say, I'm a Camaro guy. I will say it pains me to see kind of an uncertain future for the Camaro. But obviously, I mean, 67 through 69 first-gen Camaros, always perennial favorites, whether it be in stock or custom, resto mod. We see it all, and I'm here for it. So
I got a lot of hope for the 80s Camaros. I think those are going to start.
1970 split bumper. That's the one for me. The 1970 split bumper with that big, massive grill, just open its mouth and eat you up. Love them.
Yeah.
Love them. Love them.
I'm an 80s Camaro guy. I like the 80s Camaro.
Sure.
Right. Well, 60s, 70s, and 80s, there's one for everybody.
Yeah.
Third gen is slowly on the rise, I will say, just because, you know, that era, you know, very little excitement was coming out of Detroit.
Facts.
But, you know, guys, it really speaks to the fact that even though there's not monster horsepower numbers from those years, people still have memories with those cars.
Yep.
And sometimes it's the charm of the, you know, maybe, the lower horsepower figures, or even the digital dash, guys, I'm sure that we can all relate to. I'm saying just the quirky nature that now, as we look back, is very retro cool. You know, again, the pixelated dash, the pixelated radio, that speaks to an era. So even though those cars weren't delivering monster horsepower performance figures, it doesn't matter, because collecting is not driven purely by that. There's a lot of people that want the biggest, the baddest, of course. Yeah. But there's a lot of people that say, hey, man, I had one of those cars in high school, and I would pay anything to get one back just to relive those memories. It sounds like you might be one of those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And me personally, like, I would love a third-gen Camaro with a stock interior and an LS inside the hood.
Oh, an LS. You'd want to go modern.
Absolutely. But why not?
We're seeing some of these 92 IROCs. I've seen them go for $42,000 already, Matt. That's not small money for an old IROC.
No, I mean, and you know, typically for the longest time, you know, one of the standout collectors was the pace car, right?
Yeah.
The from '82, blue and silver, very distinct. And because of that, you know, provenance or notoriety of being there at Indy, that was one of the main ones. But you're exactly, just because there wasn't a lot of other special editions or tuner versions during those years, like there was in the 4th gen, you know, when we saw all kinds of stuff being happening during those years. Right. But when it comes to the 3rd gen, though, you're exactly right. It's those super clean IROCs. You know, and those are the ones that are making bigger and bigger dollars, and a lot of people can't understand, because, you know, that